Well, a bunch of us went to Costa Rica on March 27th, and we stayed there until April 4th. We flew in from Orlando. It turns out that you can get a JetBlue flight that will get you to San Jose, the capital, and it only takes about 3 hours. Another nice thing about birding in Costa Rica is that it's 2 hours difference in time. So most mornings we would get up at 6 o'clock a.m. and bird, but if you think about it, that's 8 a.m. Orlando time. So there's really no trouble getting up to do that early birding. Of course, the early birders catch the worm. San Jose is right here in the center of the country, and all the birding we did was within 50 or 60 miles of San Jose. So at the beginning, we went north to the La Selva region. And then after 3 or 4 days, we went south to the Savegre region, which is up in the mountains. La Selva region is more tropical, more rainforest, and flatter. Just about everybody that flies into Costa Rica, it seems, no matter what tour you're on, arrives at the Hotel Bougainvillea, which is a beautiful place. It's a very comfortable hotel and has a 10-acre garden. And I want to thank my fellow travelers, especially Bob Sena and Flo and Nikki and Chuck Guthrie, for providing most of the pictures that you're going to see during this presentation. They're like professional photographers, so you're going to see a big difference between my pictures and their pictures. The first night in most any trip like this, you get together and have a dinner at the hotel once everyone's planes arrive, and you get to know your fellow travelers and our guide, Glenn Crawford, who works for Wildside Tours, Wildside Nature Tours. And he comes from Belize, but he knows all of Central and South America. He's been birding for 30, 40 years, is what he told me. And by the way, he's going to have some trips to Belize this winter. If anybody wants to go, we may try to get something together through Orange Audubon Society. Costa Rica is just a beautiful place. I would consider moving there if things ever go wrong in America. They have this philosophy, and everyone says it. They don't say hello, they say pura vida. When they say goodbye, they say pura vida. Their life is about leading a pure life, and they're very concerned about the environment. And a lot of people make their living off of the environment. So wherever you go, wherever you stay, at any of these lodges, there's going to be guided walks, and there's going to be bird feeders. There's going to be bananas, ripe bananas stuck out for the birds, and there's going to be a lot of hummingbird feeders. So we're going to start talking about the hummingbirds of Costa Rica first. You can see this sign that's in Spanish and English that tells you about the difference of some of the hummingbirds that we saw at one of the locations. Yes, wherever you go, just about any restaurant or lodge will have a scene like this. This is up on a porch of a restaurant where they have the bird feeders, the hummingbird feeders out all around, and you can take pictures of the hummingbirds and the other birds that are flying around. Turns out that unlike Orlando, where we're lucky to get one ruby-throated hummingbird and maybe some stray exotic like I don't know, different hummingbirds that fly in here from time to time. But there, the hummingbirds are just all over the place fighting at the feeders. And so you have to have multiple feeders. I mean, look how many birds are at this feeder. You've got 8 birds just hanging around this one feeder. And there's over 50 types of hummingbirds in Costa Rica. And if you're lucky like us, you will see 29 or 30 of them. And we just went to 2 different regions. If you did a tour that hit the Pacific coast or the Atlantic coast or the Arenal volcano, you'd probably even see more. So we're just going to quickly go over some of the hummingbirds that we saw. And I have probably 1,000 slides. I don't want to bore you too much, so we're going to go pretty fast. Of course, we saw a rufous-tailed hummingbird, violet saberwing, purple-throated mountain gem, And of course, all these birds, you see the male version and the female version, and they often look very different. So here's the female of the purple-throated. Green crown brilliant. Another thing that makes them different is their age. So you may have a male bird, but it may look completely different depending on whether it's mature or immature. One of the littler ones was the volcano hummingbird. Green thorntail. The female green thorntail showing her tongue. Coppery-headed emerald. Black-bellied hummingbird. As you can see, these pictures by Bob Sena are amazing. He's got a great camera and a great eye for photography. White-necked Jacobin was one of my favorites, especially when it showed off its colors by spreading its tail. Long-billed hermit. Now, not all the hummingbirds have straight beaks, and their beaks have evolved to go into different flowers. Some of them are long, some of them are short, some of them are curved. Bronze-tailed plumatier, plumulatier, purple-crowned fairy. And the colors on some of these hummingbirds is amazing, especially when the sun hits them. They can turn their head from one side to another, and it looks black. And then when the sun hits it, you've got the purples, the blues, the greens. That's an amazing picture there. Talamanca hummingbird, it's a larger one. Really pretty gorget. Lesser violet ear. You may say, well, why did it get that name? Well, it actually has feathers that it can fan out that show its violet color, ear patch. Striped-tailed hummingbird. So, getting back to the Hotel Bougainvillea, some people came in a day early, some people arrived the day before we went on our bus trip, but there was plenty of time to walk around the grounds, especially the morning that we were about to leave. We had a 6 a.m. wake-up call and we all ran around, and it gets light pretty early there, so there's no problem getting out. You can hear the birds calling. Maybe they'll even wake you up in your room. You walk out in the garden and you immediately start seeing beautiful birds. What I noticed is that they have the same genus of birds. They're just slightly different than the ones we're used to. So here we have, of course, Carolina wren, sedge wren, marsh, all those things. But there you're going to see things like the rufous-snaped wren. And we just happen to catch some of the birds with their young. And you know how the baby birds will fluff their wings up, and then that is a sign to the parent that they want more worms. And so we saw a lot of feeding going on of the young chicks. One of the most common birds there, just about every region we went to, was the clay-colored thrush. There are many flycatchers. Tropical kingbird is one. And then they have some really cool birds that you will not find around Orlando area, like the Lesson's motmot, which has this unusual tail. They have doves, some of the same doves we have, like white-winged dove. Then for a jay, they have this really raucous brown jay, which is a very large jay, much bigger than our blue jays. On the property, there were actually some owls that were hidden in the bamboo, but not a secret to the people that work there and the guides. And they took us right to the spot where we were able to see 2 mottled owls. Another flycatcher, the social flycatcher. It's really hard to tell these different flycatchers apart for me. Maybe in another 10 years, I'll figure it all out. In the garden, they had bottlebrush, and you think, well, bottlebrush, that's like a hummingbird plant. Yeah, it's a hummingbird plant, but a lot of warblers and the Baltimore Orioles will actually suck nectar from the bottlebrush flowers. Not only the birds like the bottlebrush, but even the squirrels. So here's a variegated squirrel, very acrobatic, hanging on by his toenails and munching on. I don't know if he's sucking the nectar out. or eating the flowers themselves. And then there's quite a few different warblers that we don't have in America at all, like the chestnut-capped warbler. And different woodpeckers. Here's a Hoffman's woodpecker, which seemed to be the most popular one, most common one that we saw. And then as far as sparrows, their sparrows seem to be a lot more interesting than ours, our little brown jobbies. So we have the white-eared ground sparrow. And another flycatcher, the great kiskadee. You can see it resembles the other ones greatly. And another sparrow that they have there is called the rufous collared sparrow. And this is probably the most common one that you see it all over the place on the ground, sort of like a house sparrow here, but it has a beautiful rufous collar. And this is a typical picture of us. Now, the people that went on the trip with me, there were many that were excellent photographers. And so it wasn't enough to hear the bird. It wasn't enough to see the bird up in the leaves. We wanted to take photographs. And so we're very patient. Our guide was wonderful. He could hear every sound and know exactly what to look for, where to look for it. And then we'd be searching through the trees and he would spot it without even binoculars. He could see the movement of the birds. So Glenn Crawford, he's like one of the best guides I've ever been with. This is at the La Paz Waterfalls and Gardens, which is kind of a tourist attraction that they built in the rainforest. You start at the top of the hill and you work your way down, and there's beautiful plantings everywhere and lots of hummingbird feeders. I don't know if you can see, there's a hummingbird on that feeder right there. And they've planted it up like, wow, it's just amazing. It's better than most botanical gardens in the United States. But at some point, the installed plantings end and the natural plantings begin. As you go down the hill, you eventually come to waterfalls, multiple waterfalls. Before you get there, though, you walk through an amazing butterfly house, better than most butterfly houses I've been to in the United States. And here's Glenn Crawford, our guide, pointing to some butterfly that's hanging out there. There were also hummingbirds in there. And here's Paula Duenas holding a blue morpho. Of course, that's the butterfly that everybody wants to see because when it opens up, it's just as beautifully blue as can be. Back in the back behind Paula, you can see rows and rows of chrysalids. That's where they're growing the next generation of butterflies. And then they'll release them into the butterfly house. Another nice aspect of the waterfalls was that we ate lunch there and they had liquor. I tried all the different beers and all the different cocktails that were popular in Costa Rica, and everything was delicious. The food was delicious. So we got our meal and we're all tanked up and ready to go down the hill to the waterfalls. And here's our group. This is all 8 of us plus our guide, Glenn. The only person missing is our driver, John. So as I pointed out here, we saw 250 species of birds in 9 days. And we also enjoyed seeing bugs, butterflies, plants. I was in the nursery business, so I was very excited to see plants that I grew in pots and sold to my customers growing wild in the jungle. We saw reptiles, we saw mammals. You'll see some pictures of them in a second. So common birds that we saw around there were yellowish flycatcher. Love seeing the trogons. This is called a colored trogon. We saw several different types of trogons. Golden-winged warbler. This is kind of the view from the top of the hill. You can't even see the waterfalls, but they're down there somewhere. Everywhere we went, besides the hummingbird feeders, there would be a platform feeder like this, where they just put out ripe bananas, and every kind of bird shows up there, tanagers and honey creepers and Baltimore orioles, and you could just sit there for hours and different birds would come in. So here's some of the birds that you're apt to see that come for the bananas, and beautiful pictures. of the blue-gray tanager. Now here we only have a couple of different tanagers, but South America and Central America, that's one of the most common types of birds and flycatchers. Here's the silver-throated tanager. Another cute little pudgy bird is the red-headed barbet. That's just a little tiny bird. They have red-legged honey creepers. This is the female. She's quite pretty herself. And then, of course, the male is a beautiful combination of blues and light blues, turquoise, black. One bird that we do have in America is the Baltimore Orioles, and they were all down there in great numbers. This is one that's just changing its feathers out. Palm tanagers, scarlet rump tanager. This is an interesting bird called a scarlet-thighed dacnus. Scarlet rump tanager female. Look at that interesting blue beak. And now the male is completely different. You wouldn't even think that they would be mating with each other. A larger bird is the northern emerald toucanet, which has beautiful plumage. And then there's birds that we have no idea about in America, like a buff-throated saltator, prong-billed barbets. Of course, we all know what a yellow-throated toucan is. But there's lots of things out there besides the birds. So when you're looking up the trees, you might actually find a sloth or two. Here's one that's hanging down by their toes. I guess you could count the toes. I guess that one's a two-toed sloth. There's two-toed and three-toed. And a very interesting bird that's common there and very loud is the Montezuma oripendula. And they build these nests that hang from the trees. So just the right tree, you might see 10, 20, 30 nests hanging there and birds flying in and out to feed their young. The oripendula is a bigger bird than an oriole. I think it's in the same family. Another bird that's common, another animal that's common in the lowlands is the howler monkeys, which you could hear outside your room if you're lucky. And you could certainly see in a lot of these forests. And then there's little birds that also are nectar feeders, like the banana quit. Probably had its beak in those flowers before I took its picture, or before the picture was taken. And this was a really cool bird. Look at the tail on this thing. This is a long-tailed tyrant. So that's another flycatcher family member. The very unusual tail. Of course, you have lots of raptors there, probably more different types of hawks than we have in Florida. One of the most common, though, is the roadside hawk. And then we're fortunate in several places to see the southern lapwing, which has a very interesting little feather coming out of its head. So these pictures were just taken because we were driving down the road and we saw a pond that had formed, maybe from the rain. And there were a bunch of different birds that like those kind of conditions. And so they pulled the van over. They're very happy to accommodate us. Whenever we saw a bird, we'd tell them to stop. Sometimes we'd have to make a U-turn and go back and see what we missed. And in this pond, we saw the northern jacana. And this is a less mature jacana. And also we saw, this is a very young jacana in front of the black-bellied whistling ducks. You can get a size comparison. It's fun to see black-bellied whistling ducks down there. On that day, we also went along a river. There was a road and we just got out of the bus, walked up the river, and then crossed a suspension bridge and walked a little bit on the other side and then came back. So you want to go to a bunch of different environments because every environment will have different kinds of birds. Along the river, of course, we saw things like kingfishers and herons and a lot of other things that you wouldn't find in a dry area. So this is a Yeah, it actually worked. You can get an idea of how strong the rivers were. A river like that with those rocks is apt to have birds like American dippers. I think in this place we saw spotted sandpiper. So you have to, having a bunch of people all with binoculars, somebody can look one way, somebody can look the other way, and you're going to spot these things, and then everyone focuses in on it. And we did see a lot of good birds there. Oh, so one of them was the fasciated tiger heron, which is an amazing looking heron. And then in the woods around there are a lot of birds that we don't get to see in America, like the streak-headed wood creeper, black-faced grosbeak. Here you can see it eating a seed. This, I think, was just really near our lodge in the parking lot. Golden-headed tanagers. And then, of course, everybody wants to see a blue jean frog. These are a poison dart frog that they extract poisons from the frog to put on their arrows. And we actually saw quite a few. You have to just kind of pull the leaf mold out of the way to be able to see them. Another interesting bird was the russet-naped wood-rail. I think we saw this at a place called Copes. And this was just a house where the fellow had put up feeders and he had a water feature. And it was like a little oasis in the town where all these strange birds came into, especially hummingbirds. So here we are at Copes. The picture on the left shows us after we had spent an hour or two looking at the feeders and the water feature. And now it's time to put on boots so that we can go walk in the rainforest. The picture on the right shows us at the end of our walk, we were asked to rinse off our boots, which were of course totally muddy. There were many places we had to cross little streams. It was a fun walk, and I'll show you some of the pictures that we took along the walk. The most exciting thing is that we were led to see two different kinds of owls because he knew exactly where they were at. So here's crested owls, really beautiful owls. In the woods there were broad-billed motmots. And again, look at that amazing tail. The little turquoise whiskers under its bill. And something else that was pointed out to us were tent bats. The tent bats are nesting underneath a palm frond. And we're told an interesting story that normally this leaf would be V-shaped, and they chew the top of the rib of the leaf and make it collapse down to form a little tent that they can be under. So there's these little white tent bats. We saw black-throated trogons. Then we also saw spectacled owls, another amazing, amazing bird. We had to sneak up on them. I felt like an Indian. Now, after we were done there and we handed in our boots, we were put on the bus and we went down the road a piece to see another kind of owl. And this one was out in more of a field situation. So we also were lucky enough to see the smooth-billed Ani. And the owl that we came to see, which didn't let us down, our guide, I guess is Cope, and our guide, found the Central American pygmy owl. And this is a very, very small owl. I like the picture on the right where it has one of its wings extended. You can see how big the wing is compared to the size of the bird. Also out there, we're able to see black striped sparrow. Now the green kingfisher, I think actually may have been in Cope's garden. Some of these may be out of order. I apologize for that. Hopefully there's no purists that know which one should be where. One One of the inns that we stayed at was called the La Quinta Inn, Country Inn in Sarapiqui, and it was a fantastic place. It had acres of birding area. Every morning we were woken up by the birds, and they had beautiful grounds with amazing plantings. And one of the funny things we saw near the pool as we were getting ready to eat breakfast was the plumed basilisk. So we're wondering, oh, are we going to see any snakes? Are we going to see any reptiles? Yeah, we did see quite a few reptiles and a few snakes. We also saw another kind of bat. They have a little building with a cover. Well, it's like more of like an awning. And these bats, which are called proboscis bats, I guess they have a significant nose, were hanging upside down and feeding their young on the overhang. At the back of the property were some ponds, and I wandered back there. I think I was one of the few people that actually saw it before it left, but I was able to find a boat-billed heron and spectacled caiman. Other birds that we saw on the property were yellow-crowned euphonias. This is the female. Blueback grosbeak, common toady flycatcher, which is a very small, cute flycatcher that had nests there on the property. Gray-capped flycatcher. And then we were able to get some pictures of sloths. You could actually see the face on this sloth. This is the two-toed sloth. They have green ibis there. So we have white ibis, glossy ibis. They have green ibis. Look how pretty that is. And then some birds are just spectacular, technicolor, like the green honeycreeper. This is the female. And then the male looks totally different, really. I mean, I don't see a whole lot of that different color beak. Totally different, but I guess odd couple. The shining honeycreeper male. And from the hotel, we had a couple days there. So we went out on some little trips. And one of the best trips was to the La Selva Research Station, which is operated by the Organization for Tropical Studies. So we saw many, many different birds there. In the morning, we birded on one side. Then we had lunch, we came back and we crossed this bridge and we birded on the other side of the river. And here's a three-toed sloth. If you look in the circle, you can see the three toes. Another adventure was going up the mountain that was above our hotel in Sabegre area. And to get up the mountain is a very steep road. We could not take our own van up there. We had to get in this 4x4. I mean, we were really crowded in there. And it was a very steep trail, but it took us up to the upper trail where we then walked. And the main reason for going up there was to see quetzals. So this is actually probably the next day. There we also saw a slaty-tailed trogon. I'm not sure whether this is, yeah, I think this might have been at the research area. This is a chestnut-colored woodpecker. I've never seen woodpeckers that were so beautiful. One of our birds from up north, the chestnut-sided warbler, was there in great numbers. Another woodpecker, it was pretty exciting, was the rufous-winged woodpecker. They also had the cinnamon woodpecker. A really interesting bird was the fasciated antshrike. Look at that beautiful red eye and the variegation, the feathers. Some of the shyer birds were the wood thrush. One of the birds that's very large and not shy and came and got bananas and other food was the gray-headed chachalaca. Handsome bird. And we were lucky to see several of the little chachalacas. So here's a baby. Doesn't look much like the parents yet. Another woodpecker, the black-cheeked woodpecker. And of course, toucans. We had the keel-billed toucan. Another large bird is the guan, this nice red throat. And very unusual bill on the collared autocati. Look at that red butt. Golden crown euphonia. There's many different euphonias there, all little birds. I guess these are out of order a little bit. This was the one dangerous poisonous snake that we saw, and this was at the research center. And this is called an eyelash viper. We didn't really get that close. This is a long distance shot. I guess we're at least 10 feet away. I don't think it could get to us. And the guide knew where they were. And so he brought us to the spot and everyone got a nice picture. You can see the eyelash on it. So this was the lodge that we stayed in the uplands. And it was called Sueños del Bosque, which I think means dreams of the forest. And it was sitting at 7,000 feet. And you're going to see later on, we went up as high as 12,000 feet. And it was a beautiful setting. It had a really picturesque pond. The rooms were very comfortable. We had some wonderful food there. And for 2 nights, we stayed there. So during the day, we would go out to different places. But right on the property, you could see and hear things like the mountain thrush. When you got up at 6 in the morning for the early birding trip around the property before breakfast, you would hear the thrushes calling, you would hear a lot of birds. And of course, at first, we didn't know one bird song from another, one chip from another. But by the end of the trip, we were getting fairly adept at recognizing them. And our guide, Glenn, was very good knowing every call, knowing exactly where to look for the bird and making sure everyone saw the bird before we moved on. And that's one of the nice things about going on a trip like this. An unusual bird was the buff-rumped warbler. And this bird I really love. This is a flycatcher called the long-tailed silky flycatcher, and it hung around that inn, that lodge, the entire time we were there. You could see it every morning and in the afternoons. Sooty-capped chlorospingus. The black-billed nightingale thrush, which had a very pretty call. Not a very big bird. And a bird that you see on the West Coast and in Texas, the acorn woodpecker. We're lucky enough to have a telephone pole outside the hotel that had 3 or 4 of the birds on there at the same time. Flame-colored tanager. Now this is the female. She's very pretty, but look at the male. This is the male tanager, flame-colored tanager. Beautiful bird. And a bird that's hard to see in Florida, but you can see it up in North Carolina more easily, but you can also see it in Costa Rica as the hairy woodpecker. A cute little bird, the slaty flower piercer, has a special beak that's designed to pierce the flower down at the base. So it doesn't have to stick its beak into the flower, it just penetrates the flower at the base and gets the nectar that way. Here you can see it on a canna lily doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Golden-browed Chloriphonia. This is the female. And this lodge is particularly known for the resplendent quetzals, which are all over the area and actually live very close to the road. This is the road that our lodge was on. And we just walked up the road a couple hundred yards. And you can see this is a huge gathering of other bird watchers because there were 2 quetzals in this tree. And why were they in the tree? Well, the tree is a type of avocado, but it only makes a little tiny avocado about the size of your thumbnail. And it just loves those avocados. So if you can find that tree, there's a good chance you can find the quetzals. And we were blessed that we saw both male and female resplendent quetzals. And as the slide says here, the tail can measure between 13 and 34 inches in length. And yes, we saw some that had short tails, and we saw a bunch that had very long tails, different coloration. So this was one of the main highlights of the trip, was to get to see the quetzals. In the little river that runs along that road, we're able to see a torrent tyrannulet, which is a cute little bird, kind of like a dipper that will get into the water and get insects out of the water. When we went up the hill in that 4x4, this was our view of from the highlands. This is what we saw. And in those woods are some very old trees, and the trees are all covered with lichen, moss, bromeliads, orchids. So if you're interested in plants, it's just a feast for the eye and the senses. Kind of things that you would see in the woods there would be things like Swainson's thrush, which is also right around our hotel. You might see different parakeets like the sulfur-winged parakeet. Mountain Alania was all over the place. It's a little flycatcher. And then a really pretty bird is the collared redstart. Of course, we have American redstart, but it's probably not as pretty as this little yellow thing. And in the woods, not a great picture, but right at the hotel were spotted quails. We saw like a little covey, and it was still dark. It was like right at dawn, a little after dawn. So it was hard to get a good photograph. Right up the road is a little running creek, and we had not seen an American dipper, I don't think, up to this point, but we were able to find them in this creek. So there's birds that just get right into the water, swim around, and either catch bugs or eat some vegetation right out of the water. And that's what the American dipper does. Also in those woods were tufted flycatchers. We saw the yellow-thighed brush finch. I guess you can see how it got its name. More quetzals, especially at the higher elevation. We saw several quetzals. And then I think it might have been toward the last day, and there's Johnny, our driver, with Chuck. And we drove to a mountaintop that was 12,000 feet high. And they just happened to be having a marathon the day we drove up there. So there were people running all over the mountaintop. Something that I failed to mention was that earlier we had seen kettles of hawks that were getting ready to migrate to the United States. And on this day, we saw them again. And being so high, we had nothing obstructing our view, and they were closer to us. So we got some really good photographs and video. And that's the van that carried us around. We had a lot of empty seats, so some people could take up 2 seats. And we never had any problem driving anywhere in the country. It's very comfortable. And if we saw a bird and yelled stop, they would stop. So this is what we saw. Now, these are not mosquitoes. These are all hawks. They're mostly Swainson's hawks and also some broad-winged hawks. But this took up a lot of the sky. This isn't the whole bunch of them. This is a small fraction of them. I'm telling you, there were tens of thousands of hawks flying around there. So this is the main one that's in that group, is the Swainson's hawk. But we also had some broad-winged hawks. So this is a video. Just to give you an idea of what we were looking at. Of course, a birder is never satisfied with just a Swainson's hawk and a broad-winged hawk. You want to find that one in a million odd hawk that's in with the others. So this is where we were sitting. We're at 12,000 feet up. Let's see. Yeah. That's our guide, Glenn, about to slip off the mountain. Here's a better view, a little panoramic. You can see we all just settled in, looked up at the sky, and could see the hawks flying around. Another reason that we were up there was to see this bird, which is there and not a whole lot of other places. It's called the volcano junco. So if you're familiar with the junco we have in America, this is a relative, volcano junco, beautiful yellow eyes. Another bird of the forest was the timberline wren. Now we were heading back towards San Jose, and we stopped a bunch of different places to catch some different birds that we hadn't seen, things that our guide had heard about, like that there might be an owl in the city square of one of these little towns. But we had some good luck stopping in different places. Summer tanagers were actually pretty common in the area, both mature and immature. But he did take us to one cool place where he knew there was a sunbittern that was on a nest. Unfortunately, the sunbittern never got up and spread its wings so we could see the beautiful pattern. It was too busy sitting on the eggs. Every once in a while, it would get up and rearrange itself and sit back down. But that was a treat, being able to see a sunbittern on almost the last day of the trip. We also crossed a bridge over a reservoir, and some people yelled out, "Stop, there's a bat falcon." So we jumped out, and some of us ran across the bridge, and we still couldn't get that close to it, but we were able to take some pictures of the bat falcon. Another bird that we saw along the way back was a hook-billed kite. Not the best picture, but it's the best I could do. We did stop at some ruins. It's called the Ruinas de Ujaras. It was a 16th century church, and this area had been a settlement, but there was volcanoes nearby that apparently erupted, maybe earthquakes, and so it was abandoned. But it was in a park, and it was a great place to see birds. Here's our group, one of the last days of the trip at the Ruinas, and Glenn Crawford in the middle. There we did get to see crimson-fronted parakeets close up. We saw black phoebe. Spot-crowned woodpecker was very cooperative. We saw sulfur-bellied flycatcher, which we then again saw at the hotel the last day. More summer tanagers. And then back at the Hotel Bougainvillea, we arrived in time for dinner, a farewell dinner. And some of us birded before dinner, and all of us birded the next morning before our planes took off. And I was lucky to be with Glenn, and he heard this ferruginous pygmy owl, and we spotted it. Unfortunately, the rest of the group wasn't with us, so I think I'm one of the few people that got a picture of it. But this was just right at the hotel. Of course, there were a lot of Inca doves around the hotel. And there were caracaras. We were lucky to see immature as well as mature caracaras, crested caracara. And squirrel cuckoo was very cooperative. So that's it. I think we got through the 1,000 slides pretty quick. I also saw the biggest quetzal of all at the lodge. It almost ate my head off. So at this time, I will entertain questions. Is anybody still there? Did I bore everyone to death?
No, we are still here.
Yeah, you guys can unmute yourself if you don't want to type the questions.
Alan,
Good job,
you did
Alan.
a great job. You covered it.
Thanks.
Yes, fabulous presentation, fabulous.
Well, what I want you to know, especially you people that are going to Costa Rica, is that you do not have to do homework and figure out all these birds before you go. I didn't do any studying at all. I did have a book on Costa Rica, and I think I cracked it a few times, but your guide will help you along. And you can't possibly know all these birds to start unless you've been there a dozen times, or unless you're really good at studying things. I'm not that kind of a student. I just listened to the guide, I followed instructions, and we all worked through it. A lot of the pictures I took, I didn't know what the bird was till I got back to the room and did a Merlin bird ID with my photo app. So one thing I would definitely tell you is download Merlin.
Which
Yeah.
ones? See Scarlet's?
download the Merlin app, and then when you get to the country, it'll remind you that you need to put on the bird pack for that country. Just like if you go state to state in the United States, like I just took a trip to Arkansas. As soon as I got across the border into Mississippi, it reminded me to download the bird pack for Mississippi. When I got to Texas, it told me to download the bird pack for Texas. And the same thing will happen when you get to Costa Rica. It'll remind you to download that bird pack, or you can do it ahead of time. So I know I was a little scared that I might be too dumb about the birds that were there, but you pick it up pretty quick. You may not know which wood creeper it is, but your guide will tell you. And then you just concentrate on seeing the bird with your binoculars or taking pictures if you're a photographer. And for every bird picture that I took, I have another picture of a plant. You can ask anybody that was with us. I took pictures of every plant. And another good app to have is iNaturalist, because iNaturalist will identify the plants. It will also identify the mushroom. It'll identify the caiman. It'll identify the howler monkey. And if you're a photographer, and if you take a picture on a camera where it has the screen, you can use your Merlin app or your iNaturalist app to take a picture of your screen so you can instantly identify what you're seeing if it's far off. And as far as food, we ate really well. I don't think anyone got sick. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't get sick. I know that. And we ate a lot of fruit. We had fruit juices at every dinner, every lunch, every breakfast. We had fresh fruit. I never ate so much fruit in my life. And I thought I was gaining weight because I was eating so much, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I got back, I hadn't gained a pound because we were walking anywhere from 4 or 5 miles a day.
Yeah.
On CBS streaming your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been
Somebody
a
needs to
CBS
turn down
News.
their sound. One thing that you don't have to worry about is that you may be too old or weak to walk. I mean, I'm 72 and Mike was on the trip. I don't know how old you are, but you're probably older than me. And we stumbled or made our way across everything, up trails, down trails, swinging bridges. And if you're worried about falling or lack of balance, then definitely bring sticks with you. Don't be afraid to bring sticks and use them.
Walking sticks.
Yeah, walking sticks. No, they slide together. You can fit them in your luggage. We were there during a kind of cool time of the year. I don't know that you'd want to go during a hot time of the year, but was it cold? I only had one little jacket, and it's just a fleece jacket, and I was never cold. You could always put a t-shirt and then another shirt, you know, layer, and then as it gets warmer, you take it off. You're on a bus and everything is with you. So you have a backpack that's got your binoculars, your camera, your extra batteries, your charger for your cell phone, an extra charger for your cell phone in case you can't plug in on the bus. All that is right next to you on the seat. So it's just how much you want to bring. You know, bring hand sanitizer, bring bug spray, bring suntan spray, you know, bring everything that you could possibly need. But there's stores you can buy stuff if you run out. So now that I've done this trip, I'm eager to go back with Wildside and do another trip. And that guy, Glenn, said that he's trying to get together a trip to Belize, maybe for January, February. You want to go? Well,
Yeah.
keep your eyes out. When we announce it, it'll probably be an OAS trip for the Orange Audubon Society, and sign up right away. You know, I had a private room. If you can get a roommate to go with you, it's probably, you'll save some money because there's an extra charge if you have a private room. I think it's like $500 more. But if you snore or you're worried that the person that's going with you snores, then you're better off just paying the extra money. And the plane trip wasn't costly and it was very easy to get there. Everything just went so smoothly because Wildside is right on top of things. I've been on Holbrook trips too. Holbrook and Gainesville is very good nature trips. The two of them are the ones that I'll probably always go with.
I went on a Holbrook trip to Colombia a year ago. It was fantastic. A lot of the same birds that you saw in Costa Rica.
Well, similar, but maybe just different, slightly different species of the same bird. Some were the same, obviously, but
Quetzals, trogons.
yeah. Well, okay, so I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I see 40 comments.
Yeah. So one of the questions is, what was a typical schedule for each day?
You got up and had to meet the group leader at 6 o'clock, and then you would bird at the lodge. Remember, we stayed at different lodges and at the Hotel Bougainvillea. So if you wanted to sleep in, you could. You could just meet us for breakfast. But all of us were so eager that we were probably out there before 6. We were with a great group of people that just loved birding, didn't want to stop. They didn't want to sit down. Chuck is a good example. We're all eating breakfast, kind of an open area where you can see the bird feeders and the hummingbird feeders. And he's standing up with his camera, just trying to grab a bite because he doesn't want to miss 1 second of the action. So 6 o'clock, you get up, maybe 7:30, you eat a good breakfast, either buffet style, usually buffet style, or they'd bring it to you. And then you would get on the bus and you would head out for the rest of the day. Sometimes you would eat lunch at the place where you had stopped, like at La Paz Waterfalls, we ate lunch there. And sometimes, like when we went to the research station, we left there after a morning of birding and went to a really nice restaurant that was a cafeteria style and cheap and plentiful food and delicious. And then we went back to the research station. Every night we would pretty much eat dinner at the hotel. So you had morning birding and then you had afternoon birding. If it was a strenuous day of birding, maybe you get back to the hotel a little earlier, but we always got back before dinner. In fact, one of the main things we did at 6 o'clock was to meet and go over the list of the birds we had seen.
Yeah.
So here's, this is what you get. It's a checklist. I don't know if, can everyone see what I'm showing here?
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
you would check off, and each column is a different day. So day 1, you go over what you saw. Day 2, you go over and you put an X in the checklist. Hopefully you can see it. And at the end of the trip on the last day, I added up how many birds we had seen. And I think it was 253.
Wow.
Some people saw certain birds that other people didn't see. Because if you got up early or you didn't take a siesta when we got back to the hotel, you'd be out birding. And that's why I saw the ferruginous owl that nobody else saw. And there's some birds that Chuck saw that I didn't see. And there's some birds that Nikki saw that I didn't see. And there's a lot of birds that Bob saw that I didn't see. But every night we'd get together and go over the list. And then also we kept eBird lists. And so the eBird lists were shared with us. And then at the end, you can do what's called a trip report. And you can tell it what day to start at, what day to end at. And you may have 25 lists and it adds the whole thing up for you. It tells you how many birds you saw of each species. So that's really cool. If you don't have eBird, you need to get eBird.
Mhm.
The guide will share the list with you. The guide will share the list with you at the end of the day. You need to ask him every morning, did you start the eBird list? Because if he doesn't want to do it, somebody in the group will do it and then they'll share it. So what the guide will need is your eBird moniker or your email address, one or the other. What other questions do we have?
Somebody did ask if there were plentiful potty stops or enough potty stops.
No, you got to hold it in the whole day. No. Every tour group I've ever been with is very, very into making sure that you can get to a bathroom every morning, twice, maybe in the morning, twice in the afternoon. So that's one of the reasons you go to the restaurant or you go to a nice place like La Paz Waterfall. If there's an emergency, you may just have to go off into the woods. But I don't think that ever happened. I think we always stopped before or after the van has to get gas, diesel or whatever, and so it stops frequently, and they stop at nice places. Yeah, they know. And if you feel like you have to go, you just say, hey, can we get a bathroom break? And they'll find a place. Yeah.
Now, one other question is, will there be the same birds in Belize or different birds?
I think there'll be different birds. Like I said, it may be the same genus, but it's just like warblers. You have 20, 30 warblers that you see up here, but you see 20 or 30 different warblers in Colombia. And then down in Belize, which is a little further away. Actually, it's closer, I guess, isn't it? That's just below Mexico. I don't know. One thing we didn't see was we didn't see any birds near the ocean on this trip, whereas in Belize, you probably would go and see shorebirds and maybe pelagic birds. We were in the central part of the country. We didn't see things like gulls, terns. We're lucky we saw one sandpiper.
I asked Glenn that question, and he said if we went to Belize, we would probably see 50 species that we had not seen in Costa Rica.
Hmm.
Can you tell us about the hawk flyover? That's pretty cool. Swainson's hawk.
Yeah, it's all part of the migration. We're lucky if we see one Swainson's hawk in Florida during a year, right? Well, here's thousands and thousands of them flying around. They kind of gather together, and when they're ready to take off, then they start moving toward North America. But most of them are going up the West Coast. So one of the beautiful things about Central America is that you can catch migrants that do both routes, the East Coast and the West Coast, kind of funnels in toward Panama. And so, you'll see a lot of migrants that you would not see in Florida. It's just the way it is. I guess Swainson's hawks are fairly plentiful out west and up in Canada and maybe in the north. I don't know where you see them a lot. But at this point, and you've heard about hawk watches in in Key West, they have a hawk watch because we do have migrant hawks that fly up the East Coast. In North Carolina, I think there's a place, right, Deborah, where you can see the hawks?
Mm-hmm.
Grandfather Mountain, is that one of the places?
I think so.
And then I know I was up in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and they have a hawk watch up there. So huge numbers of hawks will migrate north, and if you're lucky, you get to see them. And we got lucky. It was just pure luck, I think.
And Kathy wants to know, what is the best time of year to go?
Well, I think January and February are supposed to be pretty good, but maybe for different reasons. One thing is you're not going to have as many people on a summer vacation. And it's a nice time. If it's too cold here, it's not going to be that cold there. It's, it warms up during the day. Does anyone else know that was on the trip when's the best time to go? I don't think any time could be a bad time. Now, you definitely need to bring a waterproof jacket of some kind because it could rain anytime. You're in a rainforest, and they don't call them rainforests for nothing. So there were times when it rained a little bit and we either got back in the bus or we waited it out or we're under shelter, because there's lots of places where you're under shelter and you're just looking at the feeders. As long as it isn't pouring down rain, you're in good shape. I think we were lucky with the weather in January and February. There's probably a bad rainy season, but that must not have been it. Does anyone else know the answer to that question?
Yeah, from what I understand, December, January, and February are their high season when they get more tourism, the prices are higher. Anytime from now through October is their rainy season.
Yeah, well, it may be when the prices are higher, but on the other hand, you're going to see a lot of the migrants there still.
Right,
so
and it's drier.
You have to, and drier. So I would say it's worth it to pay a little extra to be there the right time of year.
I think when we went in end of March and early April was pretty good because we missed some of the colder temperatures other than at high elevations. And we didn't hit the real rainy season that was going to be upcoming soon. So I think, you can't argue with 250 species. So that's a pretty good time of year.
Yeah, that's right. We were there in the end of March and early April. But I had looked in my notes and people had recommended January, February, but I think you're right. March and April might have been better because it wasn't as cold and there were still a lot of migrants there. Maybe the very end of March. But it's such a beautiful country. The people are so friendly. I wasn't worried about crime. They don't even have an army. Everywhere we went was neat and clean. You didn't see trash on the ground. The people take a lot of pride in their country, and they're friendly and they like to talk to you. And it's just a beautiful place. And we did see a lot of butterflies. I'm afraid I took the butterflies out of the presentation to make a little room for more birds. But we did see a lot of butterflies. We saw some interesting insects. I never felt in danger in any way.
Well, fantastic job, Alan
Yes.
and Bob
Very good.
and all that contributed photos.
Well, it was a great group of people. And it was a fun trip, and I'd do it again. In fact, I think I want to go back to Costa Rica in the next few months.
And I'll write the email to find out about the Belize trip, info@orangeaudubon.org if you're interested in being on a list for that.
I think December or January might be the dates that he said he was going to be down in Belize.
December and January.
All right, we'll let everybody go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellent program.
Yep, excellent.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It was really great seeing all those birds.
Oh,
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thanks, Alan. Good job.
Have a good evening.
Yes.
Thank
love the
y'all.
photos.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.